Seattle is a city of rain. Rain that soaks the streets, the hair, and sometimes, even the hearts that once believed they could never love again. He was a cold, distant billionaire. She was the small woman who dared to walk through the wall of ice he had built, armed with nothing more than a glance and a fragile faith in kindness. But love isn't always a miracle. Sometimes it's a storm one that sweeps people apart, only for them to find, years later in this same wet, cold city, a way to love again. This isn't just a love story. It's a story of healing, courage, and learning how to stay even after everything has fallen apart. If you've ever lived through a season of rain and sadness, this story is for you. Seattle in late December was so cold and wet that you could almost feel the rain seeping into your bones. From the 37th floor of Madison Global Logistics, the city blurred under a silver haze, streetlights reflecting off the glass like fallen stars. Steven Madison stood still before the wide window, a cup of cold coffee in hand, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He didn't see beauty, nor the cars moving below. All he saw were the falling numbers on this morning's profit report. In his world, everything had a price, even loyalty. He had built this company from the ground up, not to be loved, so he would never need anyone again. At 38, he embodied cold success, handsome, ruthless, and completely alone. Steven didn't even look up that morning when his assistant entered with a packed schedule. "Call in the new consulting team for 10 o'clock, he said flatly. "If they bring another pile of useless theories, cancel their contract by the end of the day." "Yes, sir." "Which room would you like to meet them in?" "The main conference room. And get me fresh coffee, black, no sugar." Patience, for Steven, was the rarest currency, and he'd never had much of it. The company was in crisis. A supply chain breakdown had frozen shipments and triggered million-dollar penalties. 6 consulting teams had already failed. Now the 7th was about to walk in, and he expected nothing. The door opened. "Mr. Madison, the consulting team is here," said his assistant. "Their representative is Miss Julie Johnson." He nodded, eyes still on the data. "Send her in." The door clicked shut, and then came a voice different from every sound that had filled his office that morning, gentle, yet firm. "Good morning, Mr. Madison. I'm Julie Johnson, supply chain analyst. Thank you for your time." Steven looked up. Before him stood a woman in her early 30s, wearing an old grey suit, hair neatly tied, no jewelry. But something in her eyes made him pause, a quiet confidence that didn't need proving. "You've reviewed my company's files?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. "Yes, sir. And if I may speak frankly, your problem isn't the supply chain." He set his pen down and narrowed his eyes. "Go on. Your system works fine. The issue is trust. Your departments don't believe each other's data. The warehouse reports late, and the purchasing team relies on outdated numbers. They operate like 3 separate companies. If you grant me full access to the internal network, I'll need 3 weeks to rebuild the communication process." Steven leaned back in his chair, silent. Every expert before her had talked about software and technology. None had mentioned people. 3 weeks? Maybe less, if you don't reschedule my meetings 10 times daily. For the first time in months, he laughed. A short, dry, but genuine laugh. "You're key direct, Ms. Johnson. I was hired to fix the problem, not to please you." His assistant, used to flattery, looked up in shock. Steven watched Julie, a flicker of amusement crossing his eyes. "All right. 3 weeks. You'll have all the access you need. Surprise me." Julie nodded. No sign of triumph, just a calm, polite smile. "I'll start this afternoon." When the door closed, Steven stayed still, staring at the space she'd just left. A woman who dared to say, "You're wrong," without flinching. He didn't know why, but his heartbeat had skipped just a little. That evening, he watched her through the glass wall of his office. Julie sitting with the tech team, speaking slowly, taking notes by hand. No one roared, but the whole floor worked smoothly. By 8 o'clock, most employees had gone home. Only her desk lamp was still on. Steven stepped out of his office and stopped behind her. "You're still here?" "Yes. I'm reviewing last month's inventory data. Planning to stay all night?" "No. Just until I find the source of the discrepancy." He glanced at the stack of papers, then at the cold coffee cup beside her. "I tend to order dinner late. Have you eaten?" Julie looked up, hesitant. "You don't have to." "I don't have to, but I want to." "Pizza?" She smiled faintly. "Your choice. Just no seafood." Noted. When the warm pizza arrived, the smell of cheese filled the cold conference room. They sat across from each other amid piles of files and glowing screens. "Do you always stay this late?" Julie asked between bites. "Often. It's quieter here than at home." "That sounds lonely." "I'm not good with silence. It makes me overthink." Julie nodded, eyes still on the spreadsheet. "Maybe silence isn't the problem. You just haven't learned how to sit with it yet." Steven looked at her, and for the first time in years, he wanted to listen. In the following weeks, everyone in the building grew used to seeing Steven and Julie in late-night meetings. She wasn't afraid of him. Maybe that's precisely why he couldn't stop noticing her. Julie worked in an unusual way, practical, but deeply human. She spoke to every warehouse clerk about their routines, wrote handwritten notes, and listened more than she talked. Steven had always believed emotions got in the way of efficiency, but he began to doubt his philosophy when he saw once indifferent employees working harder simply because they felt respected. One stormy night, Julie entered his office with a thick stack of reports. "I found the root cause," she said, tired but excited. "I'm listening. People. They're afraid to report mistakes in time. They're afraid of you." Steven froze for a second. "Afraid of me?" "Yes. You've made them believe mistakes are crimes, not chances to fix things." Her voice was gentle, not accusatory, but her words struck hard against the armor he'd built around himself. "And you? You're not afraid of me?" Julie smiled softly. "No, you're just lonely." The room went completely silent. Rain drummed on the windows, and his face softened under the white light. "You think you know me?" "No, but I know what loneliness smells like." He didn't ask more, but from that day on, there was a thread between them, thin, real, and dangerous. 2 weeks later, Julie finished the project ahead of schedule. When she presented her solution, the board of directors sat in silence, fully attentive. She wielded data like a weapon, clear, precise, effortless. When the meeting ended, Steven leaned closer and murmured, "Just for her, you just saved this company millions." "I just did my job." "No, you did more than that." After everyone had left that evening, he called her into his office again. On the desk, beside the documents, were 2 cups of coffee. "I'd like to offer you a permanent position," he said. Julie sat down quietly. "I'm honored, but I can't." "Why not?" "My mother's ill. I'm working 3 jobs to pay for her treatment. If I take this full-time, I'll lose 2 of them. I can double your salary. The company offers health insurance. Why do you want to keep me so badly?" "Because losing you would cost more." Julie laughed softly. "You sound more like a contract than a person." "That's who I am. Maybe that's what you should try to change." She stood, gathering her files. "Thank you for the offer, though. I'll think about it." Steven looked at the untouched coffee beside the empty chair when the door closed. He felt something unfamiliar in the scent of coffee and rain outside a small, painfully human emptiness. That night, as Julie left the building, she glanced back and saw his silhouette by the window, half lit by the glow of the city. A faint, unreadable smile touched her lips, half pity, half empathy, and in a low, steady voice, the narrator whispered, "Sometimes, you don't need to break the ice with a hammer. You need someone patient enough to stand outside, hand pressed to it, and wait for it to melt." The story closed there at the moment when a glance, unnamed but undeniable, had already begun to change them both. Julie didn't know it yet. But that night, as she walked away into the Seattle rain, was the moment Steven Madison's frozen heart began to thaw slowly, but irreversibly. Seattle slipped into winter beneath endless rain and biting wind. For most people, this city meant warm cafes and soft jazz melodies drifting through fogged-up windows. However, for Steven Madison, winter was simply another work season because not everyone could face their loneliness, and he preferred hiding behind spreadsheets instead of confronting himself. Julie was still at the company under contract. Her first project had ended, but Steven kept finding reasons to extend her stay. "We need to monitor the system post-implementation," he said. though he knew it was running flawlessly. On those late-year nights, the 37th floor was lit by only 2 lamps. Neon light shimmered on the glass. Rain drummed steadily outside. Julie sat at her desk, hair loosened, tied up loosely with a pen, while Steven stood a few steps away, silently watching. She had a way of focusing entirely on her own, no rush, no noise, just calm concentration that unsettled him. Maybe he'd been staring too long, because Julie looked up and asked softly, "How long do you plan to keep looking at me like that?" Steven flinched slightly, then masked his unease with a stiff tone. "Just thinking about the data." "Data?" Julie arched an eyebrow. "It seems like you're thinking about something other than data." She smiled faintly, a fleeting curve of her lips that somehow stole his breath. Steven turned away, grabbing his coffee to hide the confusion flickering in his eyes. That night, they worked until nearly midnight. The whole city seemed to hold its breath beneath the rain. Then his phone rang, his assistant reporting that Julie's car had run out of gas in the parking lot and taxis weren't answering in the storm. Steven grabbed his coat and headed downstairs. Julie was struggling in the rain, her coat soaked through. When she saw him, she laughed, a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. "You didn't have to come. I'm fine." "No, you're not," he said quietly, opening his car door. "Get in." The car rolled forward, rain streaking down the windshield like silver threads. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Julie gazed out the window, her voice low. "Seattle rain never ends. I've lived here 10 years and still haven't gotten used to it. Maybe because you don't let yourself feel anything." "Feel?" Steven frowned. "I have things to handle. There's no room for feelings. But feelings are data too, Mr. Madison. Data humans need to survive." He glanced at her, wanting to say something, then said nothing. They rode in silence until the car stopped in front of her apartment. Julie unbuckled her seatbelt, but didn't get out right away. She turned to him, her eyes bright in the glow of the headlights. "Do you ever get tired? Of work? Of yourself?" The question caught him off guard. Julie nodded slightly. "It's okay. One day, you'll get tired. And when that day comes, I hope someone is willing to sit beside you quietly, without needing to do anything at all." She opened the door and stepped out. The rain caught her hair, glistening under the streetlight. Before closing the door, she leaned down, peering at him through the misted window. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Madison. Call me Steven." "All right then, Steven. Good night." The door shut softly, leaving only the scent of rain. Steven sat there long before realizing his heart was beating far too fast. The last days of the year passed with the rhythm of rain. The company closed early for the holidays, but Steven stayed behind, claiming he had reports to review. In truth, he didn't want to go home to that vast penthouse of white walls and suffocating silence. He stayed at the office, and so did Julie. That night, she brought 2 cups of hot cocoa and set one on his desk. "I figured you wouldn't eat dinner." "You figured right. I knew it. People like you never allow themselves to rest. If I stop, everything falls apart." Julie sat across from him, the screen's glow lighting their tired faces. "You know, Steven." She paused. "I used to think I could keep emotions out of my work, but maybe I was wrong." "Why?" "Because some people make you forget what logic even means." Steven looked at her this time, really looked. They fell silent, the only sound the rain tapping on the glass. In that stillness, something inside him cracked like ice, splitting in the heart of winter. He spoke softly, voice rough. "Julie, do you know?" "Know what?" "That I'm terrified of this. More than anything." Julie tilted her head. "Terrified of what?" "Of feeling, of caring, of losing control." She smiled sadly. "Then don't feel, don't care, don't lose control." "I can't," he whispered, taking a step closer. The distance between them shrank. Julie stood, as if to say something, but when their eyes met, words disappeared. Steven reached out, brushing her cheek warm, trembling. She didn't pull away. The kiss came like a breath, wordless, reasonless, 2 lonely souls finding each other in a cold, rainy night. Every rule, every wall, every lesson melted. They forgot everything, only breath, heartbeat, and the rain remained, playing a song for a beautiful mistake. The room glowed dimly with city light, their reflections blurred across the glass wall. Afterward, they lay still, saying nothing. Julie's voice broke the quiet, barely above a whisper. "This was a mistake, Steven. I know. Then why does it feel so right?" He didn't answer. He just pulled her closer, her head resting on his chest. Outside, the rain kept falling. And in that 37th floor room, two people who swore they'd never let anyone in found the first warmth they'd known in years. The next morning, Steven woke early. Julie was still asleep, her hair spilling across his shoulder, and her face was peaceful. He sat there momentarily, watching her, quietly dressed, and left the room. On the table, he left a small note, the handwriting neat and restrained. "Early meeting. Thank you for the night." Only his lingering scent remained when Julie woke and the soft patter of rain against the window. She picked up the note, reading it repeatedly, a faint, sad smile forming on her lips, so fragile it made the room feel colder. And the narrator's voice returned, slow and quiet as a breath. "Sometimes, we don't know which night will become a memory. We only know that when morning comes, some things can never be the same again." A month after that night, it was still raining in Seattle. But to Julie, the rain had lost all its poetry. It was just a sound now, repetitive, hollow, and heavy with nameless loneliness. She and Steven still saw each other every day at the office. No one mentioned that night. No look lingered longer than it should. Everything between them was covered by a thin layer of silence, fragile, false, and painfully polite. Julie kept telling herself that the night had been a mistake. She worked harder, came early, stayed late, and kept her distance. But her heart had changed. Something small and warm had started beating quietly inside her. Something she knew she shouldn't feel. Until that morning, Julie woke up with a wave of nausea. She blamed the coffee from last night, but it didn't go away. It stayed with her the whole day. That afternoon, when she realized her cycle was more than 10 days late, her pulse spiked, part fear, part disbelief. She bought a pregnancy test on her way home. It was raining. Cold drops hit her collar as she ran across the street, the box hidden deep in her coat pocket. Her small apartment sat in an old building, peeling walls, creaky windows that moaned whenever the wind blew. She locked the door and turned on the bathroom light. The white glare made her pale face even paler. Her hands shook as she opened the box and set the test down. 2 lines. Clear, sharp, red. For a few seconds, Julie couldn't breathe. Then she began to cry, not from joy, not from fear, but because she didn't know what she should feel. She looked into the mirror. A 30-year-old woman stared back alone, trembling, carrying within her a tiny life born from a night that never should have happened, with a man she wasn't sure had ever loved her. She sank to the floor, hands in her hair, tears mixing with the sound of rain outside. That night, she picked up her phone and opened the chat labeled Steven Madison. Her fingers hovered over the message box for a long time. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." The message was sent. Steven replied almost instantly. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., conference room, 37th floor." Julie stared at the screen, her heart tightening. "No, are you okay?" No question mark. Just a meeting request. And she knew the next morning could change everything. The following day was colder than usual. Julie wore a thick sweater and held a cup of coffee she couldn't drink. Inside the elevator, she watched the numbers climb to 37. The doors opened. Steven sat with his back to her, looking at the rain-streaked skyline. The morning light glinted off his grey suit, making him look distant, almost unfamiliar. "You said you needed to talk?" His voice was steady, precise, detached. Julie took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The air froze. Steven didn't turn around right away. He kept his eyes on the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I tested 3 times." Silence. Julie clenched her fists, her heart pounding. "Steven, I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know." Then he turned. His eyes were dark, void of the warmth that once held her in that rainy night. "And what do you plan to do about it?" "I'm keeping it." He took a step closer. "Julie, you understand I don't want children, right?" "I know. But this isn't just your decision. You know I don't believe in family. Or love. I made that clear. I don't need you to believe in it. I need you not to deny it. Steven's jaw tightened. Are you even sure the baby's mine? The words hit like a blade. Julie stared at him, her tears gone, voice steady. You really think I'd do something like that? I'm just asking for clarity. Silence. Then she nodded slowly, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. Thank you for asking. Now it's clear. She turned to leave, but his following words, cold, unthinking, cruel, cut through the air. If you decide to keep it, have the baby alone. Julie froze. The sentence echoed in her head, each word a slap. She turned back, her gaze unwavering. Fine. I will. She walked out, moving quickly through the hallway lined with busy employees. No one knew that in those 15 minutes, she had lost her entire world. When the elevator doors closed, Julie didn't cry. Only when she stepped into the rain did she lift her face, letting the water hide her tears. Everything dissolved the night. The laughter, his eyes, all of it vanished, as if it had never been real. 3 days later, an email arrived from HR. Your contract has been terminated early. Thank you for your contributions. Julie read it, her hands trembling, then let out a quiet, broken laugh that sounded like something inside her had just snapped. She looked around her small apartment, the few belongings, her laptop, the worn notebooks, and a photo of her mother when she was young. She placed a hand over her stomach and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mom's here, even if no one else is." That night, the rain kept falling. But in the darkness, she wasn't afraid anymore. She knew she was stepping into a new battle alone, with only one reason to keep going, the life growing inside her. And the narrator's voice came soft, solemn, like a shadowed echo. Sometimes, a single sentence can kill love. But that same sentence can also teach a woman how to survive. Have the baby alone. And she did, not just to bring a child into the world, but to bring herself back to life. February in Seattle was so gray that people forgot what blue looked like. Julie stood at the doorway of her empty apartment. 2 small suitcases and a backpack were all she had left. 3 weeks had passed since Steven said, "Go have the baby alone." 3 weeks have passed since her contract was terminated. 3 weeks after realizing everything she had once believed in: fairness, kindness, love was more fragile than breath. This apartment had been her home for 3 years. Now, the rent was overdue, and her mother's hospital bills were still piled up. She closed the door for the last time, listening to the lock click shut, a slight, final sound that seemed to seal away an entire chapter of her life. Julie drove out of downtown through a drizzle. The streets gleamed with wet reflections. People hurried under umbrellas, each carrying a quiet story. And she carried 3 small lives growing inside her. The doctor had said the pregnancy was healthy. 3 heartbeats. Julie had stared at him, unable to believe her ears. 3, she asked, her voice shaking. Yes, he smiled. 3 tiny hearts beating together. Leaving the clinic, she sat in her car, hands over her belly, heart racing. Not 1, 3. If 1 child was already a challenge, then 3 was an entire war. She didn't cry. She tilted her head back, staring at the car ceiling, and smiled faintly. "All right," she whispered. "We'll make it somehow, the 4 of us." Julie moved into a shelter for single mothers, narrow hallways, yellow lights, the faint smell of disinfectant. She was given a bottom bunk, a few old blankets, and a small wooden locker. That first night, she lay awake listening to the whispers of other women, the distant cries of babies in the dark. No one asked where she came from. No one asked why she was there. In this place, everyone carried a past too heavy to retell. She lined up for morning breakfast, then walked to the public library to look for work. But as her belly grew, employers became hesitant. After weeks of rejection, Julie realized she'd hire herself, if no one would hire her. She opened her old laptop and started a blog. Its title, Triple Expectation. The first line she wrote read, "I'm a woman carrying 3 babies. Their father doesn't want to know. I have no home, no money, only faith they deserve to live. This is my journey. If you're lost somewhere like me, know we are not alone." The first post was short, But those few lines felt like the first crack in the wall of silence she'd been trapped behind. She wrote every day about standing in food lines, waking up with an aching back, and learning how to smile even when there was nothing to smile about. 3 weeks later, her blog had over 500 readers. Women from everywhere wrote to her, "You don't know me, but your story helped me stand up again. I was abandoned, too, when I was pregnant. Thank you for speaking for us." Julie read every message, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't expected that by telling her story, she'd start to heal herself. One afternoon, she received an email from a small magazine. They wanted to publish one of her posts. The payment wasn't much, but enough for a month's worth of fresh groceries. She said yes. That night, she sat in her little room, hands resting on her belly as she felt 3 gentle kicks. "3 little girls?" she whispered, smiling. "If that's true, I'll name you Lara, Jean, and Kitty, 3 tiny flames that will light my life forever." Outside, it started raining again. But this time, the rain didn't sound sad. It sounded like a heartbeat, steady, patient, alive. By May, Julie's blog had become a phenomenon. It had grown to tens of thousands of followers from a quiet internet corner. People called her the Woman of Hope. Julie didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted to survive. But every comment, every story shared by another woman, reminded her that she had become part of something much larger than herself. One spring morning, she sat in a community clinic waiting for an ultrasound. The doctor turned the screen toward her 3 strong heartbeats. All healthy. Julie cried this time, from real happiness. The doctor smiled. "Do you have anyone here with you?" "No." "Well," the doctor said softly, "you've already done more than you think." Julie looked at the screen, placed her hand on her belly, and whispered, "My loves, I've been afraid of so many things, but from now on, I fear only one, that I won't be strong enough to protect you." As her belly grew, she wrote less, but each post carried more weight. She wrote about applying for food aid, about sleepless nights worrying over medical costs, about Rosa, the woman in the bed next to hers, who gave her the warmest blanket she owned. "Here, among people who have nothing left to lose," she wrote, "I've found the truest kind of kindness." That post spread everywhere. Readers began sending gifts, baby clothes, bottles, soft blankets. Julie accepted them, then gave half to other shelter mothers. Rosa smiled at her. "You have a light in you, Julie. Don't lose it." "I don't know if I have any light, Rosa. I'm just trying to live." "Sometimes," Rosa said gently, "just daring to live is the light." In July, the doctor ordered her to rest completely. Carrying triplets had drained her strength. Julie lay in bed, hand on her belly, listening to the rhythm of 3 tiny hearts beneath her skin. She turned on her phone and typed her last post for a while. "I've lost everything, but when these 3 little hearts kick inside me, I know I've never lost myself." She hit publish. The post spread like wind. Thousands of messages poured in wishes, prayers, love. Among them was one anonymous comment. "I was once the one who left. You made me regret it. I hope you and the babies stay safe." Julie's heart tightened. She didn't know if it was Steven, and she realized she didn't need to, because her world no longer revolved around that man. That night, Rosa reached over and touched her hand. "Sleep, mija. Your 3 girls need a strong mother." Julie smiled and closed her eyes. She saw 3 small lights swirling around her in her dreams, laughing like wind chimes. For the first time, the future didn't scare her, and the narrator's voice returned, soft and warm, drifting over a quiet piano melody. "There are women who don't need to be saved, because in the moment they were left behind, they learned how to become their own shelter." Julie Johnson alone in the world, but never truly alone. November in Seattle, and the rain had never really stopped. The sky hung low and grey, and Christmas lights blinked faintly on the tall, wet buildings. Julie lay in her narrow shelter bed, her belly stretched so tight it felt like it might burst. Every slight movement stole her breath. Her pregnancy had gone longer than the doctors had predicted. The babies, her 3 stubborn little miracles, were still holding on, strong and willful, just like their mother. Each morning, she counted the kicks, 3 gentle taps, 3 whispers of life moving inside her. Rosa sat nearby, sewing a tiny blanket. Mija, are you ever really ready for this? Julie smiled weakly. I think so. Need a little more time. No one's ever truly ready, Rosa said, her needle flashing in the lamplight. But you'll be fine. You're stronger than you think. Julie squeezed her hand. In these past months, Rosa had become like a quiet, steadfast mother, gentle, wise, always knowing what to say when words were needed most. That night, the first pain came, sharp, electric, slicing down her spine. Julie gasped awake, drenched in sweat, clutching the blanket. Rosa, Rosa. Rosa sprang up, saw Julie's pale face, and shouted, "Call an ambulance, she's in labor." The rest blurred into flashes of sound and light, sirens wailing, blue-red reflections across rain-slick streets, hands gripping hers, a nurse's calm voice near her ear. "Breathe, Miss Johnson. You're going to be all right." Julie nodded through tears, not from fear, but disbelief. This moment was real. The hospital lights were harsh, sterile white. They wheeled her into the operating room and masked her face with oxygen. Somewhere above, a doctor's voice echoed, "Prepare for C-section. Keep her pressure stable." Julie trembled. "Please, save my babies first," she whispered. "If something happens, save them." A nurse leaned close, squeezing her hand. "You'll be fine, sweetheart. We'll save all four." The surgical light flared. Then, a cry, thin, fragile, but piercing straight through her chest. "Baby, a girl," said the doctor. Julie wept, not from pain, but from pure, shattering joy. A minute later, another cry, "Baby, be girl." Then silence. Too long. Julie tried to lift her head, gasping. The third one, and then a softer sound, weak but alive. "Baby, see girl. 3 beautiful daughters, Miss Johnson. All safe." Julie laughed and sobbed all at once, too tired to speak. A nurse brought her the 3 tiny bundles, 3 red, wrinkled angels, swaddled in cloth. Her trembling fingers brushed their faces as she whispered, "Lara, Jean, Kitty, welcome to the world." Morning came softly. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtain, warm and gold. 3 cribs stood beside her bed, each holding a faint, rhythmic breath. Julie sat up slowly, her body sore, her heart impossibly light. Rosa entered with a small bouquet of wildflowers. "My God, look at these little angels," she whispered. Julie smiled faintly. "I did it, Rosa." "No, we did. All 4 of us." Julie squeezed her hand again. Amid the antiseptic air and steady beeps of the monitors, she felt something clear and profound. She had won. Not against Steven, not against fate, but against fear itself. The first few days were a storm of exhaustion and love. The babies took turns crying, eating, sleeping as if they'd made a secret schedule inside her womb. Julie learned to tell them apart by sound. Lara cried out for food. Jean whimpered softly, needing only a cuddle. And Kitty hardly cried at all, just watched her mother with wide eyes, as if asking, "Are you okay?" Julie would laugh and whisper back, "Yes, baby, I'm okay. I promise." She took the first pictures with her old phone, 3 tiny girls, 3 pink-wrapped bundles of joy. Then she posted them on her blog, writing, "Lara, Jean, and Kitty. We've arrived. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but today we are alive. And being alive is already beautiful." The post spread like wildfire. Hundreds of thousands of comments poured in, words of blessing, admiration, and gratitude. Many said they cried reading it. Many sent gifts. One message stood out: "We are all born from tears and courage. Thank you for reminding me of that." Julie read each one, tears streaming again. She didn't feel like a hero. She was just a mother doing what every mother does, protecting her children. On the 5th day, the doctor said she could stand. Julie gripped the crib for balance, taking careful steps. It hurt, but she felt herself coming back to life with every step. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight glinted off puddles and glass. For the first time in months, she found Seattle beautiful again. Not the city of pain anymore, but the town where a new story had begun. She turned back to the 3 sleeping babies and whispered, "I promise you'll never lack love. Even without your father here, I'll love you enough for both of us." Rosa interred, smiling. "Who are you talking to?" Mija. To my little world, Julie said softly. Rosa nodded. Then your world has begun again. Julie smiled. Yes, but this time it's mine. That night, the hospital was quiet. Julie stayed awake, running her fingers through Lara's soft hair. She thought of Steven not with anger, but with a calm sadness. He didn't know about this moment. Didn't know that 3 children with his blood were sleeping here. Didn't know that even in denial, he still lived inside every small heartbeat. She whispered toward the window, You're not here, Steven, but they'll grow up surrounded by love. And you know what? They have your eyes, all 3 of them. A faint smile touched her lips. Then she began to hum, her voice hoarse but tender. Sleep now, my 3 little girls. Tomorrow is long, but I'll walk with you. Through rain, through wind, even when no one believes, we'll live, love, and belong to each other. Outside, rain began again soft, like a blessing, and the narrator's voice closed the chapter, slow and luminous. In that white hospital room, there were no flowers, no husband, no congratulations, only a mother, her 3 daughters, and 3 heartbeats beating as one. It wasn't just the birth of children, it was the rebirth of a woman, stronger, more accurate, and no longer alone. Steven Madison once believed that loss was a weakness. He thought money, power, and discipline could buy anything, even peace. But one March morning, as he scrolled through his phone, he saw a headline that made the world stop. The mother of triplets, abandoned by a powerful billionaire. He clicked. The first line froze him. Julie Johnson, former employee of Madison Holdings, shares her journey raising 3 daughters alone after being fired during her pregnancy. 3 daughters. His hand trembled. The coffee cup slipped from his grip, shattering against the floor. On the screen, Julie appeared thinner, steadier, stronger, and in her arms were 3 tiny girls, each with the same grey eyes as his. His breath quickened. His heart stopped. And in the echo of that silence, her voice came back to him. I'm pregnant. It's your child. He had laughed coldly then. He had said, Take care of it yourself. Now the world was hearing the same story but from her side. And for the first time, everyone believed her. And he had nothing left to say. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Steven, we need an emergency meeting, his PR director shouted through the line. Do not read the comments. Stay off social media. The press is everywhere. Steven hung up. He didn't care. He just replayed the video embedded in the article. Julie sat in a small room, her hair loosely tied, 3 cribs behind her. Her voice was calm but unyielding. They said I was foolish for keeping the babies, for not giving up, for believing I could be a mother on my own. But I don't regret it. I don't need an apology. I need my children to know I chose them, even when it cost me everything. Steven felt the sting of tears before he realized he was crying. He wasn't the kind of man who cried. He had watched millions vanish in market crashes without blinking. But now, 3 baby giggles through a screen brought him to his knees, face buried in his hands. He didn't know where to start making it right. The next day, the Wall Street Times ran another headline. Investors turn their backs on Madison Holdings, stock down 12%. The board called an emergency meeting. Steven sat at the long table, surrounded by sharp suits and colder eyes. We need a statement, one of the directors demanded. Something official, deny it, clarify it, anything. Steven's voice was rough. There's nothing to deny. Silence. Every head turned toward him. You mean? Someone started. Yes, he said quietly. It's true. I told her to handle it herself, and she did. She raised 3 children alone. The CFO leaned forward, face pale. Do you understand what you've done? The shareholders will destroy you. I know, Steven said. But for the first time, I don't care about shareholders. The room stayed dead and still. Then, chairs scraped the floor individually as people stood and walked out. The few who stayed looked at him with something between contempt and pity. That night, Steven sat alone in his penthouse. The place that once symbolized success now felt like a glass prison. The city outside still glowed, but inside, only emptiness. He opened his laptop and typed, Triple expectation, Julie's blog. She was still writing, never once mentioning his name. She called him the absent one, The absent one isn't just a name, it's a choice. He chose not to see, not to listen, not to believe. But the children still grow. They laugh, they love. And maybe, in the end, the one who truly lost wasn't us. Steven read that last line again, and again, and again. The one who lost wasn't us. He closed the laptop and stood before the vast window, staring at the rain-streaked city. Below, people were living messy, flawed, real. And he, the man who had climbed higher than anyone else, had never felt so hollow. He picked up his phone, scrolled to her name, Julie Johnson. His fingers shook as he typed, "I read your story. No excuse can make it right. I need to know, are the girls healthy?" He hesitated, then hit send. A second later, the screen flashed. "Message failed. The recipient has blocked you." Steven let out a dry, broken laugh. "Fair enough," he murmured. "She finally did what I once did. She closed the door." A week later, the company released a statement. Mr. Steven Madison will step down temporarily as CEO to address personal matters. Stocks continued to fall. But this time, he didn't feel fear. He felt light. The weight of power had been cut away, leaving only an ache where it used to be. He sat by the window, TV flickering in the background. A news anchor's voice rose. "Julie Johnson, founder of the blog Triple Expectation, has reached 1 million followers. She's being honored as a symbol of strength and motherhood." The screen showed her smiling on stage, holding her 3 daughters radiant. "Alive," Steven whispered, almost to himself. "You won." Then, after a pause, "Not against me, but against the world that once made you kneel." April in Seattle. The rain wouldn't stop. Long, thin drops slid down the car window like time itself, slow, heavy, unrelenting. Steven sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the small white house at the end of the narrow street. A wooden fence, a patch of wet grass. 3 tiny bicycles leaned under the porch. Julie's house. She had moved out of the shelter months ago now, renting a modest place near Green Lake. Steven knew, not because he'd sent anyone to find her, but because he couldn't stand not knowing where his children lived, how they laughed, how they grew. He had driven around this block 4 times already, each time stopping at the corner, watching from behind the rain-streaked glass, hoping for something, a door opening, a glance recognizing him, a small sign of forgiveness. But nothing. No Julie. Only the sound of laughter, high, bright, echoing through the drizzle. 3 little girls, brown-haired, rosy-cheeked, with grey eyes that mirrored his own. They ran across the lawn, chasing each other, shouting "Mama," between bursts of giggles. The word pierced him deeper than any headline ever could. How many years had he lost? 3? No, an entire lifetime. A lifetime spent mastering everything except love. He stepped out of the car. The rain soaked his shirt instantly, cold against his skin, but not as cold as the ache inside him. He walked to the white fence. One of the girls, the smallest, he guessed it was Kitty, spotted him first. She stopped running, tilted her head, and walked closer. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice clear as a bell. Steven's throat closed. "I'm a friend of your mum's." Kitty studied him curiously, then frowned. "Are you crying?" He gave a small, rough laugh and wiped his face quickly. "No, it's just the rain. Mama says rain doesn't fall inside your eyes," she said, matter-of-factly. Something inside him cracked. He crouched down so they were eye level. "What's your name?" "Kitty. And those are Lara and Jean." The other 2 turned, saw the stranger, and bolted toward the porch. "Mama, there's someone at the gate." The door opened. Julie stepped out under the porch light, wearing a thin cardigan, her hair damp, sticking to her cheek. Their eyes met, and in that second, Steven saw everything. Shock, anger, pain, and the profound, quiet exhaustion of someone who'd been hurt too much to believe again. "What are you doing here?" Julie asked. Her voice was steady, but it trembled underneath. "I just wanted to see them," he said softly. "Just once. Then I'll go." "You had that chance 3 years ago," she said coldly. "You threw it away. Remember?" Steven swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the three little faces peeking behind her legs. "I know. I was wrong. There's no word strong enough to fix that. I just needed to tell you I'm trying to change." Julie folded her arms, her eyes sharp as glass. "Change doesn't mean showing up when the cameras are watching, Steven. This isn't for the cameras," he said quickly. "I've left everything behind. I'm here because I truly want to be their father." Julie gave a quiet, tired laugh. "Being a father doesn't start with wanting. It starts with staying." "I know," he whispered. "Just give me one chance to prove I can stay." She looked at him for a long moment, then spoke softly. "You don't need to prove it to me. You need to prove it to them." "How do I do that?" "With time," she said. "By showing up, without promises, without conditions." "I will," he said hoarsely. Julie sicked. "Tomorrow, they have an art class at the community center by the lake. You can come, but you stay outside. You don't go in. You don't talk to them. Don't scare them." Steven nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I promise." Julie held his gaze one last time, a look that was both warning and mercy. Then she closed the gate. The soft click of metal echoed through the rain, gentle but cutting. The next day, Steven arrived early. The Green Lake Community Center was a small brick building with glass doors that looked out over the water. He sat on a bench outside the lobby, holding a cup of coffee gone cold, his heart pounding like it used to before a board meeting. Parents came and went, chatting, laughing. He kept his head down. Then she appeared, Julie carrying 3 little backpacks, holding 3 small hands, 3 moving bursts of color. "Mama, I'm going to paint a rainbow. I'm painting a cat. I'm painting the tall man from yesterday." Julie froze for a heartbeat. Her eyes flicked toward the window toward him. Steven lowered his head, staring at the floor. Through the glass, he heard the girls' laughter, and for the first time in his life, he realized how unworthy he was of that sound. For 2 hours, he sat outside, motionless. Through the wide window, he watched them paint, chatter, and run to show their mother their messy masterpieces. Julie sat among them, hair tied back, smiling softly. The sight made his chest ache. He wasn't a CEO anymore, not a leader, just a man sitting outside a door, learning to love from a distance. When class ended, Julie led the girls out. She stopped when she saw him still there. "You stayed," she said quietly. "I promised I would," he replied. Julie nodded, then turned to the girls. "Say goodbye to the nice man, sweethearts. He's an old friend of Mama's." 3 little voices chimed in unison. "Bye, mister." "Bye, girls," Steven said, trembling but smiling anyway. Julie looked at him one last time. "The girls have a field trip on Sunday. If you want, you can come, but only to watch." "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded, then walked away, her daughters skipping beside her, their laughter fading into the breeze. Steven stood there long after they were gone. The rain began again, soft and steady. This time, he didn't run for cover. He let it fall over him, washing his face, washing the old version of himself away. Pride, arrogance, and guilt. For the first time, he felt alive, not because of wealth or power, but because somewhere in this city, 3 little laughs existed. 3 heartbeats he'd once abandoned, still waiting, quietly, for their father to find his way home. Early summer in Seattle. The rain had thinned, and the sunlight softened, as if the city wanted to give people another chance to begin again. Steven still came to the community center every week. No more suits, no driver waiting by the curb. Just a man in rolled-up sleeves, carrying a box of cookies for the art class of the 3 little girls. He still didn't dare call his daughters. Julie saw him, but said nothing. At first, she thought he'd stop coming after a few weeks, like all those who said, "I'll try." But he didn't stop. Week after week, he showed up. He didn't talk much, didn't ask for anything. He just sat quietly in the corner of the courtyard, sometimes moving tables, sweeping floors, or placing flowers on the teacher's desk. One morning, Lara ran up to him, holding a sheet of watercolor paper. "Look, mister, I painted the rain." Steven blinked. The picture showed 3 little girls under a pink umbrella. Behind them stood a tall, blurry figure, unfinished, as if the painter hadn't known how to draw his face yet. "Who's this?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. "The tall man who sits outside the door," Lara said. Steven gripped the paper tighter, his heart stinging. So, his patients had begun carving his name into their small memories. That evening, Julie found a small envelope under her gate. No signature, just a folded sheet of paper. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I want to give something to those who helped you stand when I couldn't." Attached is an anonymous donation to the community center, the place that raised a strength I was too blind to see. "Thank you for teaching me what it means to stay." Julie held the note for a long time. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was that final line. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her desk drawer. Watching her daughters sleep that night, she realized she wasn't afraid of waking up with bitterness in her chest for the first time in years. Days passed. Steven began volunteering at the center. Nothing glamorous: washing dishes, scrubbing floors, lifting crates of food. But he worked hard, quietly. No cameras, no attention. No one there knew he had once been a CEO. Elena, an older woman who worked in the kitchen beside him, smiled one afternoon. "You're learning fast." "Learning what?" "How to be ordinary." Steven chuckled. "Harder than I thought." "Hard, but worth it. You've got kids, right?" He froze. "3 daughters." "Then you already know," she said gently. "Every important lesson starts when you kneel to their eye level." The words stayed with him all day. On Sunday, the community center held a summer fair. Parents set up small booths: cookies, crafts, games. Julie was responsible for painting on river stones, and Steven was assigned to the food stand. It was the first time they'd worked in the same space since the day he'd fired her. No one mentioned the past. They didn't need to. Every time Julie turned around, he was already doing something: hauling water, tying balloons, picking up trash. Around noon, Kitty came running. "Mama, the tall man makes the best hot dogs." Julie laughed softly. "Really? Did you thank him?" "Yes." Steven turned, their eyes meeting for just a second. Julie nodded, just a slight, quiet nod. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but acknowledgement. And somehow, that was enough to make his throat tighten. By afternoon, a light rain began to fall. Everyone hurried under the porch for cover. When Steven came over, Julie gathered the paint supplies, holding a tarp to shield the table. "Thanks," she said shortly. "No problem. Are you planning to do charity work for the rest of your life?" "If that's the only way you'll believe I won't run again," he said quietly, "then maybe yes." Julie looked at him, not angry anymore, just tired. "I don't need you to do good for me. I know. I'm doing it for them." "Good. Then keep going. But don't expect anything from me." "I'm not expecting. I'm just here." A cool gust of wind passed between them. Julie shivered. Steven hesitated, half raising his jacket to offer her, but stopped midway. "I still remember," he said softly. 3 years ago, you told me I'd regret it." Julie nodded. "And you did." "I did," he said. "Regret isn't enough, Steven. Regret has to come with learning how to do things differently." "I'm learning." "Good. Keep learning, but don't use me as your test." The words were sharp, but not cruel. He realized they were boundaries, just doors waiting for patience to open them. The next morning, Steven's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Lara, Jean, and Kitty's preschool is having their summer concert this Friday. If you want to come, you can. Sit in the back row. Don't say anything. Don't introduce yourself. Julie." Steven read it repeatedly, his chest trembling like a boy who'd been forgiven for the first time. Friday arrived. He sat in the last row of the small auditorium, surrounded by parents who had no idea who he was. Then the music started. 3 little girls stepped onto the stage, wearing yellow dresses, hand in hand. Lara sang the loudest. Jean laughed the most. And Kitty quiet. Curious Kitty looked around the crowd, searching. Then she pointed. "There, the tall man," she shouted proudly. The audience burst into laughter. Julie turned. Their eyes met across rows of chairs, across years of silence. And for the first time, there was no past between them. Only the present, simple, warm, enough for both of them to breathe in the same rhythm. August. Seattle had never seen a summer this beautiful. Blue skies stretched wide. afternoons soft as spun sugar, and children's laughter echoing down every street. Steven had become the familiar tall man at the art class, the park, and the weekend picnics. No one whispered anymore, no parents stared. He didn't talk about the past, didn't mention money or power. He just showed up, sat on the grass, colored with the kids, folded paper boats, grilled hot dogs at little campfires. At first, Julie still kept her distance, but slowly, almost without realizing, she stopped tensing up whenever he appeared. She saw the change in him. He no longer tried to prove anything, no longer wore the guilt like armor. He was there, as quietly and steadily as any ordinary father. One afternoon, Kitty sat in his lap, holding a crayon. "Mister, do you have a papa?" she asked. Steven froze. His chest tightened. "Yes," he said softly, "but he wasn't a very good one." "Did he yell at you?" "Yes. He yelled a lot." "Did that make you sad?" Steven smiled faintly and brushed her hair aside. "It did, but it taught me something important, that I have to be different. I have to be someone my daughters will never be afraid of." Kitty nodded, serious as a sage. "I'm not scared of you. You're tall, but you're kind." He laughed, but the tears were already falling before he realized it. That night, he came home late. The penthouse was still silent but not empty anymore. On the table lay 3 small drawings. Lara's Rain with the tall man, Jean's 3 people laughing, Kitty's the tall man with a big red heart. He pinned them on the wall where his business awards used to hang, turning it into his gallery of love. He brewed coffee, sat back, and stared at those bright splashes of color. Something unfamiliar filled him, warmth flowing through old cracks where loneliness used to live. No more emptiness, no more echo of power, only laughter in his memory, and the quiet breath of a man who finally knew what love felt like. Autumn came early. Julie invited Steven to the girls' 3rd birthday party. It was the first time he'd stepped inside the house he used to watch from afar. Everything was simple: balloons, a vanilla cake, paper garlands, and the soft chaos of 3 excited children. Julie met him at the door, no smile or coldness either. "You made it. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for not giving up." Just one line, but to Steven, it felt like part of his soul had been forgiven. Lara ran up, holding a plate. "Tall man, I got cake." Jean shouted, "Sing with us," and Kitty grabbed his hand. "Sit next to Mama." Julie stiffened for a second but didn't refuse. She pulled out an extra chair at the table. The same man who had stood outside the gate for 3 years was finally allowed inside. When the candles were lit, the girls chanted, "Make a wish, Mama." Julie smiled. "No, this year, let the tall man make one." Steven stared at the tiny flames, breathing in deeply. "I wish," he began softly, "I could be here every year to watch them grow, to hear them laugh, and to make sure they never have to be afraid again." Julie said nothing, but when the candles flickered out, her eyes glowed faintly warm as the light that lingered after. After the party, when the girls were asleep, Julie stepped onto the porch. Steven was tidying up, gathering ribbons and wrapping paper. "You've really changed," she said quietly. "Do you believe that?" "I'm not sure yet, but the girls do, and maybe that's enough for now." He nodded. "I don't expect forgiveness. I want to do what's right." Julie turned slightly, her voice soft as the night air. "For the first time you said that, and I believe you." She went back inside. Steven stayed on the porch, gazing through the window at the 3 tiny angels sleeping soundly. He whispered, "Thank you for giving me the chance to learn how to love." That night, he wrote a letter, not to send, to keep. "Julie, I used to think love was control, that it was about winning or losing, who needed who more. But love, I've learned, is when you stop fearing the other person's absence. I left once and lost everything. Now, I want to stay quietly, gently, and true." He folded the letter and turned off the lamp. Outside, Seattle rested under a tender, endless night. Steven slept without dreams of the past for the first time in years. Only saw 3 small lights: Lara, Jean, and Kitty laughing in the sky, calling out, "Daddy." And in his sleep, he smiled and whispered back, "I'm here." 3 years later, autumn in Seattle. The early October breeze carried the scent of dry leaves and faint traces of coffee drifting through the streets. Steven parked his car by the narrow road leading into Green Lake Park, the place that had once witnessed every moment he waited, watching from afar, afraid to knock. But today was different. Today, he was allowed to walk in. Julie sat on a wooden bench beneath a canopy of red maple leaves, holding a cup of cocoa. Lara, Jean, and Kitty ran around her, their laughter twirling in the sunlight. Steven walked closer. Julie looked up and smiled softly. "You're on time. I was afraid that if I came late, I'd miss my first officially invited picnic." She chuckled. "You've got a long-term pass now, Steven." He grinned. "Really? Really? But you know the rule, it only stays valid if you keep your promise." "What promise?" "To keep being a good man, even when no one's watching." He nodded. "I promise." He spread the picnic blanket, took sandwiches, juice boxes, and sliced apples from the basket. Julie watched him move, quiet, practiced, comfortable. He is so different from the man who once commanded a staff member to make his coffee right. "You really have changed," she murmured. He smiled. "No, Julie, I didn't change. I just found the part of myself I buried." Her eyes softened. No more guarded walls, no more cold distance, just a calm, gentle quiet, the kind that comes after the storm, when there's nothing left to prove. As the sun dipped low, Julie called out to the girls. "Say thank you to the tall man for the picnic, girls." "Thank you," they chimed in unison. "You don't have to thank me," Steven said, smiling. "I love being here." Kitty tugged his hand. "Mister, why don't you always stay with us?" Julie froze, but Steven didn't look away. He knelt, speaking gently. "Because your mum and I are still learning to be together and giving each other space." "What does that mean?" Lara asked. "It means you can love me even if I'm not here every day. And I can love you without calling it anything special." The girls looked at one another, then giggled. "Can we still call you Daddy?" Steven went silent. His throat tightened. He looked at Julie. She didn't speak, just nodded once. "Yes," he whispered. "I'd love that." And then 3 tiny voices rose together in the golden light. Daddy. The man who once had everything now owned only one thing. But it was all he'd ever needed. One word, 3 little hearts, and a woman who had once been broken, now smiling softly again. That evening, Steven drove the girls home. Julie waited at the porch, the warm light from inside falling across her face. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" she asked. He smiled. "Is that a real invitation? If you promise not to spill it this time." "Yes." He laughed and followed her inside. The house was cozy, walls covered in the children's colorful paintings, clumsy, bright, and alive. Julie poured him a cup. "No sugar, no milk. I remember." "You still remember?" "There are things you forget, and things you don't." They sat quietly for a while. Then Julie said softly, "I don't know what the future looks like, Steven. I can't promise anything. I don't need you to. I just know the girls need you. And maybe I do too, but not the same way as before." "What way then?" "The way 2 people share parenthood, not romance. If something more comes later, let time decide." Steven smiled. "That's the fairest deal I've ever had." Julie laughed, light as wind. And at that moment, they both knew no contracts were needed. Life itself had already written a new one, in quiet sincerity. A year later, Seattle's first snow fell softly over the lake. The 3 girls ran around the Christmas tree in the little house by the water. Julie hung knit stockings by the fireplace. Steven, now a master of cocoa, firewood, and fairy lights, worked beside her. At midnight, Kitty climbed into his lap. "Daddy," she whispered, "I know who Santa is." "Oh yeah? Who?" "It's you, 'cause only you remember everything we wished for." Steven hugged her tighter, blinking away the sting in his eyes. Julie stood at the doorway, smiling quietly. She didn't speak, but she knew. Wounds can heal when the one who caused them is brave enough to stay, and the one who suffered is kind enough to open the door again. The narrator's voice softened, like warmth filling a winter room. Sometimes love doesn't end with a confession. It ends with an ordinary dinner, a cup of coffee with no sugar, and the laughter of 3 children. Julie Johnson was no longer the woman who'd been left behind. Steven Madison was no longer the man who ran. They were a family, not perfect, not complete, but enough. And as the snow blanketed Seattle, The door that once closed between them now stood open forever. Thank you for walking through beneath the Seattle rain with me. If a moment in this story made your heart ache or warm, leave a comment below. Tell me what you believe: love, forgiveness, or second chances. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of hope, faith, and those who've walked through the rain and still chose to love. Asterisk.